I got Molly. Guy Short, Julia Agger, Patrick Frank, Shelby Cole, come on. So I have this issue with podiums. Yes. Millie? Yes. So I'm not going to use that at all. I'm going to come and sit with you guys. And I promised everybody for coming to Napa and having fun and joining us today that we'd start out with a 30-second commercial on yourself and your company. Tell us a little bit about who you are. This is your chance.
My chance right
you
now.
You almost need no introduction at all, Shelby.
I don't know about that. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelby Cole. I am here because I worked on Beto O'Rourke's campaign for U.S. Senate. I did his digital. I am currently at Authentic Campaigns, which is a new firm that popped up last year. And my #1 client right now is Kamala Harris, who's running for president.
Well, there you go.
Hey, everyone. I'm Julia Agger. I just started a digital firm called Sapphire Strategies. We specialize in online fundraising, advertising, social media, and just general digital strategy. For the past 8 years, I've been working at the Democratic Party committees. Most recently, in 2018, I was Chief Digital Officer at the DCCC, where we raised $110 million online and helped campaigns, House campaigns on the Democratic side really just raise a ton of money online as well. Also had the chance while I was there to build an in-house digital advertising and creative team for the first time.
And believe me, we read your stuff every day. Good stuff.
You may have seen our emails.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Patrick Frank. I'm the Outreach Director for Act Blue. Act Blue is the infrastructure that the left uses to fundraise online. If you've donated to Democrats any time in the last half decade, you've almost certainly given through Act Blue. And in addition to providing the infrastructure, we also have a team of organizers and work with campaigns all over the country to help them maximize their use of the tools and raise money from small dollar donors.
And we're going to amplify on that in just a minute. Molly.
My name is Molly Parnell. I'm the president of Golden State Strategy Group, which is a California-based fundraising company. I've been fundraising in California for just over 10 years and have raised money for candidates, party committees on the state, local, and federal levels. I am currently part of the team at the California Republican Party, working with our new chairwoman, Jessica Patterson, to build a statewide fundraising program. And I'm also part of leader Kevin McCarthy's finance operation as well. Those are my 2 biggest clients.
Hi, my name is Guy Short, and our company is Campaign Solutions, and Becky could probably do this better than I could. But we are a full-service digital company. We do everything from digital advertising to building apps to building websites. We're probably best known for doing fundraising, email fundraising, advertising fundraising. If it's done digitally, we do it, and we've done it for over 20 years.
We're old. Patrick, I'm going to start with you, because all that we've seen on the news lately is Act Blue, Act Blue, Act Blue. Is there a Republican Act Blue? Why isn't there a Republican Act Blue? There's so much of a myth around you guys and what you actually are. Would you just take a minute and share with everybody, I know how you got started and what the mentality was and this, that, and the other, but tell us what you really are and where you came from and why.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. We're definitely in the news a little more than we're used to this year, and so I know that leads to questions. So Act Blue was founded in 2004 by 2 Cambridge kids who had an idea for technology and wanted to get involved in politics and make sure voices were heard. 14 years later, 15 years later, we are still a nonprofit, and we believe that democratizing power is good for the country, and that when more people engage in the political process, we're going to get better outcomes. And so even though we are used by all these campaigns similar to the way you would use a vendor, we actually don't work for campaigns. We work for the donors. And what we're actually doing is providing them an opportunity to be involved in a campaign The end result tends to be that we work well with campaigns as well. But at the end of the day, we believe that if you lower the barriers of entry to politics, you're going to get better outcomes. And not just the barrier of entry to donating through good technology, but lowering the barrier of entry to being part of a campaign, lowering the barrier of entry to running for office by taking all of the complicated parts of running for office and streamlining them. So, I know we're in the news a lot for the political race right now, and sort of the big names and the Beto campaign certainly got us some press hits. But what really, really is the core of our work is the breadth of what we're doing. We worked with 14,997 separate entities in the 2016 cycle. Over 6,000 different entities have already gotten checks from ActBlue this year. And so it's about making sure that whether you're running for city council or president, you're given the exact same tools, the exact same price, and the same things that Beto was able to use in his campaign. A mayoral campaign has access to the exact same tools. There's no different tiers to it.
I love the fact that you say that you work for the donors. We should all be saying that. But there's a big discussion now, at least on our side of the aisle, is it the vehicle or the driver? What makes things go? Is it the platform? Is it the message? Which way do we want to go to do a better job for our donors? Guy, do you want to start that?
Well, I think on our side of the aisle, obviously, as you said, there is an enormous amount of discussion about how are we going to respond to ActBlue, right? ActBlue did, everything I read, $1.6 billion.
In the 2016 cycle,
give or take, 100 million here or there, right? And on our side of the aisle, we want to be there, right? We want to do the $1.6 billion, and we're not there. And so I think the good part about that discussion is that we're finally having it. And for those of us who spend our days doing fundraising for the low dollars, primarily with us on the digital side, we're glad to have that discussion. We're glad that everybody's focused on it. But Becky brings up a great point. Is it the vehicle? Is it the driver? What actually is the competitive advantage that ActBlue has over the Republicans? I love the discussion. And let me ask you this question. If Republicans, if we build that vehicle, will we launch from wherever we're at now, 500 million, 400 million? Will we launch to that 1.6? Is that all we need to do to get there?
No.
Yeah. Actually, thank you, because you've got fundraisers on the panel too, and so that's a perfect segue. Thank you for that. And I'm actually going to go to Julia first because you've done 8 years in the committee.
Mm-hmm. I know. Yeah.
Welcome to the easy side.
I mean, we'll see.
Thank you for your service, too. You're doing the Lord's work.
Exactly, that's tough. And of course, I wasn't being funny. We actually read everything you guys wrote, and we were
copied a lot of it, too. We do that.
Yeah. Anyway, what do you think? How do we help our campaigns raise more money? How do we help our committees raise more money? How do we do it ethically? How do we do it? How'd you do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that it's interesting because I think ActBlue for Democrats is a big piece of the puzzle. It isn't like the solution that's going to raise money and make money pour from the sky. I mean, ActBlue, it provides a couple really important tools that when during my experience at the committees and now as a consultant, the campaigns that I'm working with and the committee really benefited from, like being able to have donor information saved in one place and having highly optimized forms that load really quickly. At the same time, those tools are critically important after somebody has clicked a donate button and gotten to the page. And then they're like in the process of giving, but there's a whole additional step many additional steps that you need to take in order to, first of all, get people on your email list or text list or whatever it might be, actually work to collect people's information, and then also come up with highly optimized messages that you're getting in their inbox or on their cell phone or in their Facebook feed that are encouraging them and motivating them to give money and be part of the community that you are building around a campaign. And so I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but I mean, an important email list building or text list building, and coming up with messages that are going to resonate with people and move them to action and make them feel like they're a part of your campaign. Those are two other very important pieces of the puzzle that I think that it takes a lot of work and optimization and list building and money, like an investment, to get there.
Yeah, it's not just luck. Molly, I'm going to go to you next because you have the big picture. So being an overall finance director, you're responsible for all of the money, where it gets raised, and we tend to think that the world begins and ends with digital. We know it doesn't, but we kind of think it does. Can you give us some perspective on what does it take to have a robust finance plan, and if you feel like it, do you care to quantify in your budgeting for an organization or a campaign how much comes from each sector?
Sure, absolutely. So first, I'd like to add to what you guys were talking about, because as a fundraiser, I feel like we have two challenges. One is encouraging those that are running for office to focus on fundraising. It can be very intimidating regardless of the level that you're running for office, from local office to, I'm sure, running for president. The sheer amount of money required to run for office from small to large has become so significant that a lot of times really good people are detracted from running just simply because it's so hard to wrap your mind around raising the kind of money required these days, right? And so that's one challenge as a fundraiser. The other challenge is getting the donors an easy enough avenue to give. No matter what level they're giving at, if they're giving $10 or $1 million, they have to feel like we provide them an easy avenue to give. And that's where something like Act Blue is so relevant, because it creates less of an intimidation factor for the candidate and less of an intimidation factor for the donor. And it connects those two pieces together. So there's no question in my mind that we need to replicate that and build something hopefully as good, even better than Act Blue on our side of the aisle. I would say that, for every campaign is different. We tend to rely more heavily on major donor fundraising because you can get more bang for your buck. Of course, we all want to find that donor that can write $1 million and wipe out half of our campaign budget, but there's just not that many of them out there. So it has to be a combination of donors from small to large in every campaign. I would say that maybe 50% from small donors and 50% from larger contributors would be a healthy balance. I've always believed that small donor fundraising, and I hate to call it small donor fundraising because I think if you're giving $10, you're giving everything you can afford to give. You're stretching as far as you can. So I hate to categorize it that way, but that level of donor communication is directly correlated to how much support you're getting amongst voters too.
Yeah, exactly.
And so if you're succeeding at that level, you're likely being more successful touching people who are actually going to come out and vote for you. So I think it's really important to have a combination of both.
So I'm saving you for last because I think once we start with you, then that's where everybody's going to want to be for the next. But Patrick, do you guys own the data?
The data belongs to the campaigns. We also have access to that data, but it belongs to the campaigns. We don't talk about campaigns numbers. We don't give it out. We don't use it. So we try and be very protective of shared infrastructure and understanding that a lot of trust is put in Act Blue to maintain that, and that if we ever blow that trust, that we'll never get it back.
So you have access to the data to enable a one-click system or something that makes the actual transaction faster, better?
Yeah, so ActBlue, one of the big competitive advantages we have in our market, and is why all of the Democrats use us, is our safe payment system. So 6.4 million people have saved their credit cards on ActBlue and can donate with a single click. And where this is really leveraged is, imagine that I, being an Austin hipster, gave to Beto last year, and it was the first time I had ever made a political donation in my life. And I saved my information at the end of the ActBlue transaction. And now I'm back home, and my local state senator sends me an email. Even though I have never opened that person's email in my life, even though I've never given to this candidate, all of my information is already saved there, and I can one-click donate to that person as well. And so I think that that's one of the big advantages that we have, is just the fact that the tool, like the technology is great. I'm not going to underplay how good our technology is. It's excellent. But it's more about the organizing. It's about letting a party have a really, really hot primary where both candidates or multiple candidates are attacking each other, and it's really ugly, and we made it to election day. And then on the next day, you've got the general election nominee with way more Express users in their district and their list. And they've come out stronger from the primary. They're stronger because of the primary. And so I think it's actually the organizing that is really the special sauce there.
Can I add something real quick, too?
Yeah, sure.
I think that one of the really important things that Patrick said that I want to highlight as someone who's partnered with ActBlue for a really long time is that they're a nonprofit. And so when talking about trust building, that's a really critical element, because I think that there's some vying on the Republican side to want to be like that company that is housing, that's being used across the board by all candidates. And it might be, something to consider, like accountability-wise, that ActBlue is a nonprofit, and that is a critical piece of, I think, why campaigns are willing to trust them. And so I just wanted to toss that out there as people are sort of vying to be the sole, processor on the Republican side.
And you capture the credit card information as well and store that?
Yes.
Okay. So you have trust from the donors also?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And we do, we have 5, 6, 7 processors on our side, and we capture that as well. Mm-hmm. The efficiency that you all have that we are trying to replicate is we have 5 or 6, but those 5 or 6 don't share it within each other. So if I give to a certain candidate, and I give through a Victory Passport, and I'm saved in Victory Passport, and so I have all the efficiencies within Victory Passport that you all have, but now if I go to another campaign that might be using Antidote, for example, an Antidote would save it as well, but they're not talking to each other. And so
Or
that's the difference.
e-donation, guys.
Or e-donation. I didn't want to pimp ours. Come on. Or e-donation, yes. We're not sharing those, and so that's one of the efficiencies that I think that on the Republican side that we're trying to have that discussion and figure out how we can compete there.
Okay, so every campaign cycle there seems to be a moment or a person or something that catches on, and you hear for the next 2 years, I want to be. Well, Shelby kind of caught the lightning in the bottle this round last time. Tell us a little bit about what you did, how you did it, and how you're going to duplicate it.
Ooh, don't know about that last one. This will probably
They
be...
think it's all duplicatable.
No. This will be the last time you ever hear from me, ever.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So, as a native Texan, it was the honor of a lifetime to have the opportunity to work on this race. it was just an incredible opportunity. And in the beginning of the campaign, I grew up in Houston. I went to college in Austin. I claimed San Antonio as home, but I had never in my life been to El Paso, and I grew up in Texas. So this punk rocker congressman out of nowhere saying that he wanted to run for U.S. Senate and challenge Ted Cruz, everyone in the state was like, who? Beto? Who is this guy? I think we could not have run the campaign that we did and funded it in the way that we did without ActBlue. I'm not going to stay up here and blow smoke the entire time, but it would not have been possible for him to capture national attention, be on the road meeting with voters across the state from day one, from the jump, without a tool to capture like small dollar contribution information, much to his finance director's dismay. I think that like they would have preferred that he did more big dollar fundraising events, but he had the opportunity to not do that and really just like hardcore campaign.
Give him the numbers. I mean, I think everybody knows, but it bears repeating.
I think it was 80 million total for the campaign. 55 million of that was online, so it's kind of huge.
55 million.
Yeah, it's a lot of dollars.
That's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, a huge piece of it, almost all of it, I would say, was like him being a kick-ass candidate, and the moment of him challenging Ted Cruz, who, if you're a Democrat in the state of Texas, you're ready to like vote for whoever to get him out of office, right? So he's a dynamic candidate running against the most, hated dude in the state of Texas for Democrats. He built this online movement powered by grassroots contributors. And then it all just kind of came together in a perfect. All I had to do was sit there and kind of like push buttons.
Actually, not true, and we know that it helps to have the atmosphere that you had and the excitement in the press and this, that, and the other. But share with everybody on a day-to-day basis, what were you doing to encourage or re-encourage donors to come back and visit again?
Sure. Well, so my background or kind of wheelhouse is in email fundraising. So I kind of touch into the ads world, I kind of touch the social world, but that's kind of what I do all day. And it really was just like capturing moments from him, from people on the road, from bigger picture campaign stuff, and just like packaging it into an email or packaging it into an ad or a Medium post and just like putting it on the internet. So there were a lot of cool moments, and we talked about them online.
Did everything work? Or was there one particular strategy that was your go-to? Was it a video or just a straight ask
So I'll say the woman that was head of our like kind of ads team throughout the process, her name is Liz Bennett, genius. She pushed the program on the ad side to do things that I think were so innovative and so interesting, but also so simple. So one thing that we tested that like everyone is doing now on at least our side of the aisle, I don't look at a lot of Republican ads. Anyway, so what she asked us to do was record a video of Beto just holding his iPhone direct to camera. Right. He a couple of times did the like walk and talk thing where someone was filming him and he was like, "Hey, I didn't see you there," and it was super corny. But people love to know that the candidate's holding the phone in front of his face, and he would say, "Hi, my name's Beto. I'm in X, Y, and Z county, and it's the end of month fundraising deadline. Can you pitch in a donation?" You slap some captions on that, and you run direct donate ads, and it went bonkers. So everyone is trying to kind of replicate and iterate on that now this cycle, I've seen. The other thing, which was incredibly frustrating to me that he was right, was at the beginning of the campaign, he as someone who, Beto ran a tech company, so he like got the internet.
Yeah.
So coming into that, it was tough for me to be like, okay, so like, let me tell you about how we're gonna try it this way, because you don't know all of it, as much as you might think that you do. So he called it his like email newsletter, which as an emailer is the worst sentence that you could possibly say. And he was like, we're gonna send an email newsletter once a week directly from me. I'm gonna write the entire thing, and all you're gonna do is hit send on it. And I was like, okay, well, this is not best practices. It's not optimized for donations. Like putting a bunch of photos in an email, like why are we doing this? No one's gonna give. And I pushed back, and we did it the first time in like launch week, and it raised more money than any other email ever had. And I was like, okay, well, we might have something here. So we did that throughout the campaign. He ad hoc would just send me content, and I would be like, well, why aren't you driving? Or like, why aren't you calling donors? But he really just wanted to write. So we would just like package that content and put it on the internet.
He's a poet, right?
Yeah, he has a lot of feelings, if you guys hadn't noticed. Yeah, a lot of feelings and a lot of words, but they raise a lot of money, so.
Well, we'll continue on in this.
Sure.
I'm going to go down the road a little bit. Julie, again, because you guys were groundbreaking at the D-Trip, Guy probably has more email addresses than anyone I've known, and he's probably on every email list that there possibly is. So I'm going to actually let you ask her a question, if you want to, about something that they did that we were always going, ooh.
You're surprising me.
I know,
I
it
should have thought of
just
this.
came to me. I'll come back to you if you want to.
Well,
for a second.
I was joking earlier, but we do copy a lot. I mean, I'm on, the only time I ever give to Democrats is so I consult their files and make sure I get all the emails. And you guys come up with a lot. The Majority Fund and the Senate Majority Fund does a really good job. And And one thing I noticed from some of your PACs and maybe from your from the committees, but not so much the candidates, is you do a lot more soft asks from PACs and committees building lists. It doesn't seem to me that the candidates do as much of that as the committees and the PACs. And I suspect a lot of that is prospecting and building lists, et cetera. And you mentioned earlier a commitment to list building. And so I guess I would say, what's your experience with soft asks versus hard asks? Do you do a lot of those? Is that how you build your lists? Or is that a good technique that you use to build your lists? Give us it all, though. Don't hold anything back.
Trade secrets. No, yeah, two things here. One, just to touch on list building a little bit. So 2016 election happened, so like Trump won. And then...
Wait, you want to say that again?
It was hard for you to say, wasn't it?
It was.
I gotta go. That's my cue.
Yeah. And so I was at the DCCC in 2016 as well. And you know, there's like when you're at a committee, there's a kind of like weird few like month or so after where there's going to be like a new chair and new leadership, and you're like, do I have a job? And then also you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life. And so we're having that, and I was like, I think maybe we can win the House. So I knew I wanted to stay and was just waiting for like the ED to get picked. And then I was also realizing that like everybody, this was actually pretty frustrating, but like everybody who like a lot of people were reaching out to me being like, what can I do to win the House in 2018? And we sent out an email that I was worried like everyone's gonna unsubscribe and hate us, like Trump just won. We sent out like a really soft ask email, and like it raised more money than like some of the emails we were sending right before the 2016 election, which was great and frustrating. And then both at once. And then so in this first conversation with like who became my new boss, the new ED, I sort of pivoted. So instead of being like, hey, I'd like to stay and this is what I want, you know, my job to look like, I was like, I would like $5 million to spend on list building, please. And we're like $20 million in debt, and he was like, oh, like, do you want to stay? And I was like, I'm not interested in talking about that. Here's this budget. Like, will you please approve it? And so somehow, like, I convinced him to give me, I think we met at like $2.5 million to spend between like the week after the election and March of 2017. And that investment, when I left the D-Trip in January, it was at 13 million paid off. So like, people were coming into the political fray for the first time. It's not like if you invest early, $2.5 million, you're gonna make $13 million. Like it was the moment that we found that people, you know, other Democrats hadn't declared yet, people were in debt, and like we were out there sort of like capturing the people. So I'll say that about list building. And then just to talk quickly about soft asks, I think that part of the reason that committees do that more than candidates is because no one knows who committees are. Like no one knows, real humans don't know like what the DCCC is or stands for. And so sometimes those softer asks give us an opportunity to share what we're doing and sort of like handholds the donor into giving us money, because they might want, like it's gonna, if we put like what we do in an email, then that would be like a really long email and it would be boring and no one would give to it. So sometimes we'll use those softer asks to like get people to the point where they want to get out their wallet. And I think it's just clearer for a candidate. Like, yes, I like this person and I want them to win the election. But if you don't know what the DCCC is, sometimes it can be helpful to have like a petitioner survey that's giving you a little bit more information so that by the time you daisy chain to an Act Blue page, you're like, yeah, I do want to defeat the Republicans because of, you know, they just voted to repeal healthcare and Obamacare in the House.
So we're not recording this. But Patrick, are you ever tempted to get out of the ivory tower? Said in a nice way.
Is that a Boston diss?
No. So you're lucky to do that. Are you
Yeah.
tempted to go into a campaign yourself? And get
So
into the-
I worked on both Obama campaigns in the field, and the reason that Act Blue appealed to me was because it's the same people. And the same volunteers who would come knock doors for me are the folks who are donating. And when I was field, I could get on stage and I'd be like, you know, I'm going to ask for your blood, your sweat, and your tears, but I'll never ask you for money. And I felt really cool saying that. But then I turned 30, and it's Saturday, and like, I don't want to go knock doors. So I realized that now that, you know, those small dollar asks are a way to engage. And, you know, to answer your question, yes and no. It's always exciting to imagine jumping on a campaign and picking a favorite. But what's beautiful about Act Blue is that I get to work on all of the campaigns. And when you see all of these news stories talking about small dollar donors, and the fact that, and this is what I'm so proud of this cycle, the press is starting to ask the right questions. They're asking, what percentage of your money comes from small dollar donors, not what percentage of your donors are small dollar donors, what percentage of your money, and what is your average contribution size? And when you see all of these like political press folks start to ask these right questions, and you see candidates building their entire campaigns around getting unique contributors so that they can get on the DNC stage, and having grassroots money be a sign of power, no, I don't want to leave. It's so exciting to be able to change the entire environment rather than just focus on one specific individual. And I think that that's a trap that a lot of us in politics fall into, thinking that this person can solve this problem, when really it takes collective power. And grassroots fundraising is so powerful because it creates a movement alongside funding the campaign.
So what we all do with Molly, a little bit different type of fundraising. What we do is instant. And so we know pretty quickly is something succeeding or is something failing. And you've got a much longer cultivation period, especially for your major donors, but you end up raising half the money from them, so it's certainly worth it. But in the discussions here at the conference about texting and fundraising, how do we all feel about that? How do we feel about the cost of acquiring a text donation? Is it more instant than email? How are we all looking at it? And maybe from an organizational, Molly, if you want to take that on, is it something you're looking at doing a lot of or a little?
I think it provides that easy opportunity for a donor to give. I think you're more likely to reach a donor by text message than you would by email, because everybody checks their text messages, not everybody checks their email. I think that my hesitation about it is I don't know how personalized it can be, and fundraising, I think at every level has to be personal. It's all, the donor needs to feel like they have a direct connector to you, and I feel like a lot of these text messages, solicitations, advertisements are still coming from an odd number that isn't entered into your phone. So I'm not sure how you give it that personal feel given how it's delivered.
In one of the panels, they were talking about back and forth chatting and assigning real people to these numbers to talk back to them, and how authentic it was and how personal it was. Somebody was talking about how is AI going to change all that, make it better, make it worse. Feel free to, what did you guys do text-wise?
Sure. So we had
And what are you doing text-wise? Because, this is another success story for you. She's raising a lot of money.
She's doing okay. So there are two kind of branches of texting. I don't want to text explain to this room, but there's peer-to-peer texting, which is like a real human to another real human. It's not, it's personalized. And then there's a short code, so where you just hit send and it sends to a bunch of people. On the Beto for Texas Senate campaign and his current presidential campaign, they are focusing a lot of their efforts on peer-to-peer texting. So you can basically enlist a bunch of volunteers to hit send on texts and then have real conversations with real people on the other end, it raised a lot of money for him. And I think that it definitely outweighed the cost. One thing that we saw was that if we weren't reaching people on our email program, because everyone has packed inboxes, and a lot of the people that subscribe to political email are on a lot of different lists. So a way to re-engage with people who were lapsed donors or someone who gave in January but hasn't given again in this quarter, just send them a quick text and say like, hey, we noticed, you know, you gave $5 on January 1st. We're up against this big end of quarter fundraising deadline. Can you give again? And we got a lot of responses there. So I think that like with great power comes great responsibility, and I worry about the future of texting because it can become it's a slippery slope, and I think that if we, as a ecosystem, progressives, I think continue to treat it and treat people on the other end of the text with like respect and dignity and don't spam them, I think that it's a very powerful tool.
So we told everybody, told all of our campaigns, don't answer your email. If you're sending out a blast email, do not answer it. Do not engage in conversations. How many congressional offices never look or respond to the email because it starts a conversation that you simply can't keep up? Mm-hmm. But yet, in texting, we're all talking about trying to do just the opposite. And the question is it worth it? Maybe.
I think it's worth it in money, but I also think that it's a fun and validating experience for volunteers too. If you are an online volunteer for a campaign and you want to do something helpful that's not, maybe you can't knock doors and you don't want to make phone calls, and you're texting with people who have contributed to your candidate before, it's like a fun experience. Like I'm so-and-so in North Texas and I pitched in $5 and I'll give again, but sure, like I want to know more about volunteering, and it's a good experience for people who are volunteering online to like talk to fellow supporters too. So.
Do you think Republican campaigns would do that?
Absolutely. And we're starting to have great success with texting. There's a lot of advantages. Inboxing is a huge advantage with texting. You're almost getting, if you're getting 98%, imagine sending an email out and getting 98% open rates. Because everybody, you get it and you open it, which means your response rates are a lot better. Some of the challenges, though, are our acquisition costs compared to email, and I think our campaigns and our consultants aren't used to that. And the acquisition cost to get a text donor is going to be a lot more. Our send costs are percentages on the penny, right? But on texting, you're looking at 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, depending on what services you're using to send out texts. And so there's a lot of success happening. I know I talked to one of our committees a few months ago, and they think maybe texting will actually do better than email this cycle. They'll raise actually more money texting than email, which is pretty amazing for one of the committees. But I think it's a lot more difficult down ballot, on the fundraising side anyway. The lower you get down, it is difficult to convince a middle of the road a congressional campaign to invest in acquiring text messages or text numbers, and then set out the long-term value. It takes a while to get all that back, and there's a lot of campaigns and a lot of consultants that don't have that patience. They're worried about cash on hand. They're worried about their burn rate, and so we're not investing.
So can we ask if there are any questions in the room? I'm happy to have everybody interrupt us if you hear something that you want to ask more of. Eleni, you're the keeper of the mic.
Hi, I'm curious what if and how you use video and what the impact of that is in your campaigns.
Well, why don't we just real quickly start at the end, go down.
Video for fundraising, definitely use it. A lot of times on landing pages, you put a screenshot of the video in the email. They click. Now you're on a donation page while your candidate or your PAC or whoever it is speaking. It's more personal. Works great at end of quarter. So yes, we use it a lot. I think the Democrats do a better job of it than Republicans, frankly. Sometimes they have candidates that lend themselves to that maybe a little bit better than our candidates do. But it's definitely used.
You all seem to have maybe a lower threshold for getting things approved than we seem to have on our side. But your stuff seems a little fresher, quicker, and maybe more authentic than you might see in a Republican campaign. But video? Yes?
Pro video. It's funny, Shelby mentioned like trying with Beto, like the direct-to-camera videos. Near the end of the cycle, definitely had an experience with Nancy Pelosi being like, just sit at my desk and look natural, hold the camera, like selfie, so you can like imagine. Yeah. I mean, but it's it worked. Like, it raised us money. You know, I think that especially for ads on Facebook, like direct to donate ads, video can be really impactful. I think it's harder sometimes in or on text messages if you can send an MMS with a little video. But yeah, I definitely think like you need a candidate who is down for it, and that can be, in my experience, some people, like especially younger candidates, where if you're like, hey, like, you know, we could raise like $25,000 if you just like record this 30-second video, then people are like, great, like I'm gonna do takes of it. And then in my experience, like the constant email bumping that can happen sometimes, like I think it can tend to be with you know, older candidates, is more difficult. So you kind of need a candidate who's willing to like go with the flow and do a bunch of takes.
Yeah, there you go.
If they're used to being staffed and prepped with like talkers too, because Beto is like, I'll say literally whatever and people will donate to this, but like with a Kamala, for example, like she really wants to know like what are the specific things that I need to say so that I'm prepared and I don't look weird. But she's gotten a lot better at it. It's been fun.
Are you guys doing anything special around text donations that we should?
Well, I do think there are a lot of advantages with ActBlue when you're talking about texting. I wasn't quite sure what rates you were talking about, but if you're talking about broadcast rates, that's like a thing you can avoid by using ActBlue. So instead of donating through your phone company, which comes with a huge fee, campaigns and organizations are, sorry, I must say.
No, just the send cost.
Yeah. So it's so now what we're seeing is a lot of folks, and Julia, I mean, can really speak to this because the D-Trip had a really impressive texting program, and what they did is just sent out links to ActBlue forms. So you're not bothering with really advanced pieces of technology. If you have the person wrong or whatever, they're still landing on a contribution form. They're still seeing all the upsells, and odds are they probably already have an Express account on ActBlue, so they're going to be one-click donating off their phone anyway. And if not, then they're cookieing their phone, so next time they will. So I see it. I think that, one, I still think email is queen, and it's going to continue to be queen, because I think ultimately you're just communicating with donors, and eventually we will get promotions and updates tabs in our texting too, if this continues. And just because folks are looking at it doesn't mean they're liking it. And I do think there's a risk of oversaturation, and at the end of the day, it's just about how are you getting your message to those donors, and are you inviting them into your campaign or asking them to be your ATM? And if you're inviting them into your campaign, whether it's on text, whether it's on video, whether it's on email, whether it's on carrier pigeon, you're going to see success.
Nuance, but very important. Okay, questions?
Two quick ones. One, ActBlue. You were asked a question, and I guess you responded to a question, and nobody followed up. I think you asked, if we do what you're doing, will we have your success? You said no. Why?
Because I think the technology is hard to do, for sure, and the infrastructure and the compliance work and all of that is really difficult. But at the end of the day, if you build the vehicle, you still have to drive it. And I still think that's the hardest thing for the right to figure out is how do you communicate with your voters and make sure that you are giving them real ownership of the campaigns. And so, I think it's about not trying to convince them to donate. It's about letting them in. And folks want to be able to drive the outcomes that they want to see. And I think when you look at the left and the right, you see a bit of a disconnect between one side who is very responsive to their grassroots because it's how they're funding their campaigns, and one side who has a very delicate dance to play. And I don't want to make this a partisan food fight, but I never met the Republican grassroots voter who was psyched about the tax bill. I'm sure that person existed. I didn't meet them, and I think that fundamentally the biggest challenge the right has isn't a piece of technology. It's a culture shift of reducing the amount of power that big donors hold in the party, reducing the amount of power that gatekeepers have, and trusting that your voters and your grassroots should dictate outcomes. And I think you've seen that on the right. There are some candidates who have raised a lot of money online, including the president. And he's done it by communicating directly with them, listening to them, And even when I might not think that there's any sort of fact basis to anything or that it's a morally positive thing that they're doing, he is certainly responsive to their calls. And that's a much bigger part of the problem than a piece of technology.
By responsive, you mean the illusion or delusion or appearance, not, am I right? You're not saying that you really have to be literally, ascertainably, empirically responsive.
I think you literally have to be honest to your donors about what you want to achieve and why you need their help. And if you are asking them to participate in a movement, and if you are saying, hey, here's what I want to achieve and I can't do it without you, then folks step up. The same way that when you need them to knock doors, they show up and knock doors. When you need them to make phone calls, they show up and make phone calls. When you need them to make donations, they show up and make donations. But you have to build that culture, and you have to make sure that you're actually listening to them and that you're telling the truth to them.
There's one more, this follow-up before you. What's small donor? Is there an agreement among your group, your profession, it's not really a profession, but your line of work, that what a small donor is?
Well, I would say grassroots donor, and you can be a max-out grassroots donor. It's about access, right? It's about not getting a phone call from either the finance director or the candidate and having this. It's about, you can max out off of Julia or Shelby's emails, or you can donate $5. It's about your means. When we're talking about small dollar donors or grassroots donors, what we're really talking about is the level of engagement and investment that they're making in your campaign, and the way that they're treated equally, whether or not they gave $5 or $2,800. And so if you're doing things special for donors at a certain level, that is where I would draw that line and say you're no longer talking about grassroots donors.
Yeah, and let me agree with my Democrat friend. We do need a culture shift on our side. I completely agree. Earlier, I mentioned that I appreciate this Act Blue, Win Right, Patriot Pass discussion because it's focusing our party on low dollars. One of the dangers, I think, though, is we have on our side, and I think it goes from the top down, we have this field of dreams mentality that if we build it, they will come. If we just have that technology, if we just have that platform, then all of the donors are going to come in. And that is a danger on our side because what it ignores is a change in the culture. And what it ignores is investment. It ignores list building. It ignores the hard work of fundraising. A lot of my fellow colleagues and folks we compete against who do great work are in this room. And most of the ones that I've talked to with this Act Blue Win Right discussion, most of them say, well, that's not the answer. It might be a piece and it might create some efficiencies, but it's not the answer. We don't. Our committees do a very good job of investing in list building, and they have big budgets and we do a very good job at that level. And the president does a fantastic job at raising small dollar donations, and he does engage in the ways that you've said. But as we go further down the ballot, we don't have that same commitment. And we don't have that same commitment from our consulting class, who, let me just give one illustration. In 2016, similar to where you guys are at this year, we had a lot of presidential candidates, and we actually had more top-tier presidential candidates than we had top-tier digital firms. And so for the first time, at least in my 20-plus years, we had multiple firms working for multiple candidates, and we would build firewalls, et cetera. And our firm did the same thing. We worked for a couple top-tier candidates, and it was great afterwards to see the difference in the kind of the consulting class. Candidate A, real story, won't use the names, Candidate A went from day one investing, building lists, and they had a culture that they wanted to build as quickly as they could, and they recognized there was long-term value at the end. Candidate B, great candidate, the consulting class there was very much worried about cash on hand, very much worried about burn rate, and they didn't invest early, right? This had nothing to do with processing. In fact, they used the same processor, right? So this wasn't a processing technology. This was a culture, and that culture was, nope, we're not going to invest there. And they didn't invest in direct mail for that matter either. At the end of the day, candidate A raised so much more money. And yeah, maybe candidate B had a good one-day story about burn rate, or a good one-day story. They had maybe a little bit more cash on hand, but at the end of the day, they raised a whole heck of a lot less money. And so Back to your question, we do need a change in culture on our side. And where I do think we're going to get some efficiencies, and I think most members of Congress are going to jump on board with Winright and what we're doing. We are not going to raise significant money. We are not going to close the gap from 1.6, and I suspect you're going to be at 3.8 next this cycle, which really sucks for us.
Sounds right.
That sounds about right. But we're not going to close that gap just by building a platform. It's going to have to be from the top down, committing and investing in list building and wanting to get to that 50-50 split or 80-20 split or whatever that appropriate.
And because they're nonprofits, there's a high degree of trust amongst everyone. So you were talking about in one race, you're doing all the candidates.
Yeah.
And everybody's comfortable with that because they know that you're an honest broker.
There's a lot of benefit for the campaigns that use our tools, and I think that, I certainly think these two would be better to speak to that trust because, I'm just assuming.
Yeah.
But
If you monetized your platform and started like renting out people's data, like you could make so much money. But the fact that you
But
don't
then they
is,
wouldn't be active.
Yeah, exactly.
But and I think there's a misconception. I think a lot of people on our side think that happens.
Oh.
I think that
Yeah,
they
a lot of people think that we're making money here.
That's where the pot of gold is, and if you just build the system, the pot of gold is there. And a lot of our members, our candidates think once that's done, we're good, and they're going to forego all of the hard work that it is going to take, and that makes our job just even extra.
There might be a pot of gold. The question is, are you taking it home with you at the end of the day, or are you reinvesting it into your tool?
Right.
Yeah,
And I think that's the difference.
And that's where as a
question.
nonprofit you can do that. Molly, you wanted to jump in on that.
Yes, I have a couple of things to add. So, I think that there's no question on the Republican side that we have a lot of work to do to catch up with the technology. I mean, your company has been around for 14 years, right? And so it's not going to happen overnight. It's got to be a combination of the technology and the energy to participate at the grassroots level. And both of those are huge challenges, but I will say that I do feel that energy there on the Republican side, on the grassroots side, on the donor side of every level to play in this election and elections moving forward. For example, at the state Republican Party, since the 2018 election, online donations are up 1,000%, grassroots donations. So I do feel that if we're able to build that technology and be smart about the way we're messaging and our messengers, and we're really very purposeful about the way that we talk to people, there is an opportunity for us to compete. Nationally, from the grassroots level donor to the billionaire donor that you guys have on your side too, we were outspent by $500 million nationally last cycle. And so we have to learn how to compete in that space in a better way.
Absolutely.
And that's a focus of ours.
Okay. Elena?
Yeah.
Tony?
In the fundraising world, and as it translates into the voter turnout world, it skews senior, more older people. Do you have any metrics on, especially from Act Blue, in terms of the people that donate, or in the other areas of fundraising, where the money comes from, in terms of the age?
Yeah, it's a question about the demographics of the donor base, and that information can be really hard to glean because we don't ask people for demographical information to fill out a contribution form. I think it's up to every campaign and committee to talk about the breakdown of their demographics. Some committees have much older donors, and then some folks are connecting really well with young voters. I have no data on it, but I'm guessing a big part of Pete Buttigieg's $7 million came from younger donors. I have no idea. One demographic I do have to share, it's not on age, but I think it's worth highlighting, is that between 2014 and 2016 cycle, the share of Democratic donors on the platform that were women went from 54% to 60%, and probably will continue growing. And I think that that's something that we can see, and that tells you a lot about where the parties are aligned.
But that's also historic data too. I've been doing this 20 years, and for 15 years we asked every donor what their age was, their gender. They didn't have to give it to us, but most people did. But you could see at the beginning it was all men because they were the early adopters and they had the technology and they were doing it. And as women become more equal technologically, you see the number of women rising. So I'd say that on the Republican side as well. The percentage of women is going up, even though the myth is that we don't have any women voters. Not true, and we have a lot of women donors too. But Julia, can you speak to that specifically? Did you guys get that information?
Yeah, well,
A lot of older people don't text in that respect. So how are you going to reach them?
But older people give. And older people may be a little more responsive to an email, or they may self-select and still go find a website to make a donation. But the average age of donors has gone up also 15, 20 years since we started doing this in the late 90s.
See, okay, I'm going to disagree with you that I think that the reason that women are becoming an increasing share of Democratic donor pools is because, and you can see it in vote history, that women are increasingly moving to the Democratic Party, and that women who may have considered themselves people who wouldn't, normally like give or become involved are becoming more involved because they are unhappy with what's happening in the country. And they're unhappy with what they're seeing from their representatives. So again, I reject that like women were behind in technology and now they're catching
I'm talking 20 years ago. It just was, and it's just the way the demographics have moved. But overall, are you seeing an increase in the percentage of female donors to the committees, or has it been at parity for a while, or?
Since I don't work at the D-Strip anymore, I don't want to share like information of theirs, but yeah, maybe just agree to disagree on that one.
Okay, that's fine. And that's fine too.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see.
Hi. So I work in fundraising. We build a tool that does AI modeling on donors, but we specifically work on the call time side and on major donor relations. So there's certainly an increase in online giving. It's exceptional in presidential giving because they have name recognition and they come out the gate with the money that it takes to buy the ads that make the flywheel work. But there's also been a dramatic increase in all political giving. And that dramatic increase is larger than just the online giving increase. So call time is still, or not call time specifically, but large donor donations is still overwhelmingly all of the money in politics. And it has grown just like online fundraising has grown. So I guess my question is, Molly made the point earlier, and she might be the best suited for this as like a real fundraising background, but you said 50-50 you thought was a healthy split. Is that a presidential split that's healthy, or like is that something that you think is coming for regular down ballot campaigns?
I think that it's something we should strive for. I don't think it's the current split. I think that, for example, I would think that the Republican Party of California raises $1 million online, and they're a $35 million organization. And I think that's probably more similar to many campaigns are, the majority of those donations are on the larger side, but that split needs to increase to a healthier 50-50 split. And what I found so interesting that you said is that because Beto didn't have to focus as much time on the donor calls and the donor events and raising the money in those traditional ways, he had more time to connect with people. And I think that's incredibly valuable in campaigning. I think the more that real people see the candidate and feel like they touch on them, the more likely we are to win those races. So I think it's really exciting to think about less focus on the major donor fundraising and more focus on the grassroots fundraising and tools to make that happen.
And if I can just add to that, I think a lot of times it definitely has to do with the candidates. And earlier, in one of the ads earlier, they showed Eric Paulson up here. So Eric Paulson was a Minnesota congressman, and I would suspect because of who he was probably 90-10, 90 major donor and 10 small donor. But another former congresswoman from Minnesota, whose district was next to Congressman Paulson's, was Michelle Bachmann, and she was the exact opposite. She was 95% small donor and 5% large donor. I think a lot of it has to do with who the candidate is and what their appeal is, and a lot of times, we have candidates on our side, and I'm sure you have them on your side as well, who just aren't going to appeal to the masses. They're not going to appeal to the small dollar donors, and so you kind of go where your strengths are. And if your strength is picking up the phone and calling a $1,000 donor, then that's where you're going to spend your time. If your strength is being able to appeal to the masses, and certainly Beto's a great example of that, you're going to spend most of your time there. So I don't know that I probably would reject that there is a it should be 50-50 or it should be 25-75 or whatever it is. I think it's campaign by campaign. What I would say though is that clearly none of those small dollars should not be ignored. If you're at 90-10, you probably could get to 20, and certainly nobody ignores the large dollars if you're able to get them.
Well, so you guys just reported a big number. What were your ratios like? I know it's early on, but how much of it was small dollar? How much was digital?
50-50.
There you go.
Yeah, raised a lot of money online.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us have seen that while money is a critical component of every campaign, it doesn't win campaigns every time. You have to have a combination of enough resources to reach an audience and tell people who you are and what you stand for, and enough time to actually talk to people. And so that healthy balance of the grassroots and the major donor fundraising is really important.
Okay, do we have
One more.
I think there's one straight back.
Oh, thanks. So Shelby, one of the really awesome consequences of the O'Rourke Senate campaign was that every other digital consultant in the country had to be on calls like 3 times a day where the client went, we want to do what O'Rourke does and raise more money on the interwebs.
I'm so
and
sorry.
so I would have to say things like, cool, cool, cool. So do you want to live stream your dentist appointment and then write your own emails? And they would be like, oh no, we don't want to do that, right? We just want to raise more money. My question for you, is, tips, tricks for building authentic digital programs, even when the candidate doesn't actually want to write his or her own emails or live stream their entire lives.
Sure. Man, I've heard that a lot, and I'm so sorry. There were a lot of candidates that had that complaint. They want to raise Beto money or Bernie money. Often a lot of our clients at my old firm were like, how do we get Bernie money without spending Bernie money? And it doesn't exist.
We want to raise Beto money and Bernie money. We want to raise Beto money and Bernie money as well.
What I will say is that, so I came from Beto world where digital was at the forefront of every conversation. Traditional comms kind of supplemented that work. It was very atypical. It was beautiful. I woke up every morning, it was Christmas. We got to do internet stuff for fun all day. I'm now on a different campaign where the culture is not the same. It's a lot more traditional comms focused, and she does split her time doing a lot more fundraising events, which to me, coming off of this 2 years of zero fundraising and the finance team being bummed always, it's been a bit of an adjustment. What I will say that there is just no substitute for removing barriers to access to the candidate, and I think that video is one way that can be done. But of course, you're going to have to work every single candidate to get them comfortable in a space where they're doing that. Not everyone's going to want to get up on a bar table and live stream that with a baseball cap on. Not every candidate can do that. The dentist thing is deeply upsetting, and I just want to show for the record that happened after I had left his team, so would not have advised that happened. But yeah, I think as much time as you can fight to get on the candidate's schedule for a little bit of internet time, whether it's writing. One thing that I like to do, and I did with Beto lots of times, was just sit in the car with him while he's driving and not live streaming, and just record him talking. I would ask him questions and prompts, and that just made the email program so much more authentic. Anything that we ran through ads was truly his voice, even if he wasn't taking the time to write it. So for Kamala, I have what we call the Kamala Bible, which is just me taking time after work to transcribe her speeches, and it's just we're pulling from that constantly. So I think there are ways you can do it from one end of the spectrum where it's all live stream all the time to someone who is very wary of having a camera on their face.
Well, and can I chime in on this? I also think that there's this misnomer about these, rock star politicians. Like, Beto is legitimately a rock star, like technically, right?
Wait, he doesn't
was
talk
he in a
about it
band?
enough.
Was
Yeah,
he
he
in a
does
band?
not talk about it enough.
But at Act Blue, and I'm only talking about 2016 right now, but like we saw the biggest digital campaign that, to that point, presidentials had ever seen from Bernie Sanders, and like, I'm sorry, but he's a guy from Vermont, right? Like a socialist from Vermont. Like, your candidate is probably as cool as Bernie Sanders. So I just think that that's like an excuse. And I think that you said it, which is you have to reduce the barrier of entry to seeing the candidate for who they are, no matter who they are. And my advice to boring candidates is be boring. Don't try and be something you aren't, because at the end of the day, all the reason that works is because voters and donors are actually seeing who you are. And if they like what they see, like, oh, look at this person who like can't crack a joke but won't stop talking about policy, then they're going to vote for you. And if they see your true self and they don't vote for you, I'm sorry, maybe you shouldn't win. And so I think that this is all the tip of the iceberg of candidates figuring out the digital age and the millennial age, is that you cannot have two separate personhoods, the public face and who you are behind closed doors with big donors. You can only be yourself. And if donors don't feel like they actually got to know you as a person, they might not vote for you. And so that's what I would say is like your candidate doesn't need to be Beto O'Rourke. They just need to be honest. Just tell the truth, and donors will make smart decisions, and we all need to trust them to do that.
And like I'll say too, I mean, it's not a Democrat-Republican thing, because you could just go like to @RealDonaldTrump, and there he is tweeting directly. And I think that that's like a part of a huge motivator for his base, is that he has a medium to talk to them directly. And there are stories that are written about how, people try to restrict his access and won't, and then that's good, right, for him and his base, because they're getting direct access to him. So it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. I think it's like catching the fact that people can talk directly to others in this age.
So all I can say is they saved the very best panel for the last. These guys are rock stars, and I know I've learned a lot today. Thank you all for being here. This was great. This was great. But before you go, just a couple of announcements. So we will see you back here at 6 o'clock for the wine poll. Tickets are on sale somewhere out there. We can get you a ticket. And then back in this space, we're taking over the whole area for the Poly Awards and dinner tonight, and it's really going to be fun. Thanks for staying. Thanks for listening. Did I forget anything? Okay, good. Thank you.
Money, it's a guy.